49ers head coach Kyle Shanahan speaking to the media about the return of Christian McCaffrey this weekend. Mentioned they were going to take him off IR tomorrow, and then he'll be good to go. Of course, McCaffrey has been out so far this season, has not played, and he will be a welcome return for the 49ers as you look at the notable injuries to monitor. Will Levis going to get the start for the Tennessee Titans. Trevor Lawrence listed as questionable. If he can't go, that means Mac Jones is going to be making his first start for the Jaguars. A couple of wide receiver injuries to make note of with the Buffalo Bills. Amari Cooper here is listed as questionable with the wrist injury, but Keon Coleman, the rookie, is out. He also has a wrist injury. Nico Collins, probably not going to play this weekend, but he is off of IR now, so he's listed as questionable. And we've got a couple of injury notes from the Washington Commanders with Marshawn Lattimore and Brian Robinson Jr., both dealing with hamstring injuries. All right, let's welcome in fantasy expert Heath Cummings from Fantasy Football Today to discuss some of the injuries, most notably the return of Christian McCaffrey. Heath, he's set to make his season debut. What kind of expectations should fantasy managers have for him this weekend?
You know, I don't even know when you have Christian McCaffrey on your fantasy team if expectations have anything to do with it. Like, how are you going to sit the guy that could score 30 fantasy points at any given moment? He's going to rank for me as a high-end number 2 running back. I'm projecting him for somewhere between 10 and 12 rush attempts, probably 3 or 4 catches. Wouldn't be surprised if they ease him in just a little bit, but it's just not someone that you could actually sit.
So then with Jordan Mason, you know, given the season he's had filling in, 3rd in the NFL in rushing, is he a guy that's still worth a start, perhaps maybe more in a flex position?
No, I wouldn't want to start any other running back on the 49ers. I would certainly want to roster Jordan Mason, though. Let's see McCaffrey get through one game healthy, because there was a point in time where Jordan Mason was the leading rusher in the NFL. So if something happens, if McCaffrey plays one game and that Achilles flares up and we're going back to Jordan Mason, you want to make sure he's on your roster. I don't want him in my starting lineup, though.
Yeah, that's one of those things we're kind of waiting to see what that workload is going to look like with a 49ers team that has been very banged up so far this season. All right, let's talk about some of these other injuries to make note of, starting with Washington running back Brian Robinson, who's out versus the Steelers. So what does that mean if you're an Austin Eckler owner?
So the Austin Eckler part is really easy. We expect him to lead the backfield in rush attempts. Most importantly, we expect him to lead the backfield in pass catching. He is a top 12 running back for me. He is a must-start running back for me. We just saw him. We've seen him repeatedly this season put up double-digit fantasy points, even when Brian Robinson was healthy. I wouldn't be surprised if he puts up 15 to 20 fantasy points in this matchup. You should start Austin Eckler. The question mark is, who's the other guy? Because we thought it was Jeremy McNichols going into last week. It turned out to be a little bit more of Chris Rodriguez. I kind of feel about those guys like I do about Jordan Mason. I really don't want to start anyone in this backfield except for Austin Eckler.
And you see the underrated, overrated from Fantasy Football Today and Sportsline. Heath on the underrated side saying Austin Eckler's a guy you want to have in your lineup this weekend. All right, we got news that CeeDee Lamb is off the injury report for the Dallas Cowboys. That's certainly good news for CeeDee Lamb owners, although we don't know about that Cooper Rush situation in terms of what that target share is going to be like for CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, Heath, one of those situations where you start your studs, but with the fantasy trade deadline coming up, is CeeDee Lamb a guy that you would be shopping at this point, given the instability at the quarterback position in Dallas?
You know, I think right now at this moment, he's more of a buy low because people are pretty concerned about what will happen with Cooper Rush. And I'm not. We've seen this before. We've seen Cooper Rush and CeeDee Lamb, I believe it was 5 games in 2022. And Lamb wasn't the top 3 fantasy wide receiver we expected him to be this year, but he was a no doubt about it must start wide receiver. He's a top 12 guy for me this week. I am not concerned at all about the target share. I'm a little bit concerned about the target quality, but I think we're seeing double-digit targets for CeeDee Lamb every single week. That's going to make him a top 12 guy.
That's a great way to phrase it, Heath. Target quality, which is certainly something to make note of. Let's stick with wide receivers here. Chris Olave and Michael Pittman are both out this week for their respective teams. When you're looking at those guys, what are the best fill-in options at wide receiver if this is a week where those guys are on your roster?
Yeah, I think, like, first and foremost, the answer is not on the New Orleans Saints. I actually went looking this afternoon and said, you know, like, it's not just Chris Olave's out. We've already lost Rashid Shaheed. Cedric Wilson's not going to play in this game. Bub Means is on IR. I wasn't exactly sure who was going to play wide receiver for the Saints. What I know is I don't want to start any of the wide receivers for the Saints. The Colts are a little bit different story. Josh Downs, a very good number 2 wide receiver, even against a bad matchup like the Buffalo Bills. Downs does a lot of his work closer to the line of scrimmage. That's what the Bills are willing to give up in the passing game. I don't hate Alec Pierce either as kind of a boom bust flex option. He has made big plays with both Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco. Wouldn't be surprised if Alec Pierce had one big play that made your day.
Heath, are you throwing shade on Taysom Hill with the Saints?
Well, he's not a wide receiver. He's not really a tight end, but he does have tight end eligibility. I do want to start Taysom Hill at tight end. He's a top 10 option. And I wouldn't be, it's kind of a weird deal. Like, that's a guy that's more likely to score a rushing touchdown than a receiving touchdown, probably. But yes, he is someone that you could start. You just can't start him at wide receiver. You can start him everywhere else.
All right. So you take a look at the PPR rankings in terms of the tight ends, and you see Taysom Hill there at 11, just below Dalton Kincaid, who might get some extra work this week given the receiver injury situation in Buffalo. All right. According to reports, Heath, the Jags are trending towards not having Trevor Lawrence this week versus Minnesota. I think he's questionable on the injury report. So how do we feel about Mac Jones in this spot?
See, this is one of the really strange ones because I think like the perception is, wow, this is a big downgrade going from Trevor Lawrence, this generational quarterback prospect, to Mac Jones, who we all kind of LOL at. And then you go look at their career statistics, and they both average 6.8 yards per attempt. They've both got a subpar touchdown rate somewhere around 3 or 4%. They've both got an interception rate between 2 and 3%. I don't know that there's a huge difference, particularly for Evan Ingram. We've seen Mac Jones work with those short area targets pretty well. I think Evan Ingram would be just fine. I did downgrade Brian Thomas Jr. from a high-end number 2 wide receiver to a low-end number 2 wide receiver. But the truth is, over the last 3 or 4 years, despite what their pedigree and their reputation is, there hasn't been that much difference catching a pass from Trevor Lawrence or Mac Jones.
So T-Law and Mac Jones are the Spider-Man meme, right? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I think statistically they certainly are.
Yeah. Okay, sticking with quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield returned to practice despite his toe injury. He will play on Sunday. How are we feeling about Baker as they go up against the Niners?
He's a low-end QB1 for me. Listen, you wouldn't think that Baker Mayfield against a great defense like the 49ers, without his number 1 wide receiver, without his number 2 wide receiver, that we'd even be considering starting him. But you would have said the same thing last week against the Kansas City Chiefs at Arrowhead, and Baker Mayfield was a good starting option. He's been the 2nd best quarterback in fantasy. Well, he might be the 3rd now after what Joe Burrow did last night. But the 3rd best quarterback in fantasy this season, and that includes some games without his top pass catchers. So he is a top 9 guy for me. I do prefer Sam Darnold. I prefer Brock Purdy in the same game. I'd rather start Kirk Cousins, but I would start Baker over someone like Patrick Mahomes or Matthew Stafford.
Okay, the Tennessee Titans to end here go to face the LA Chargers. Will Levis is set to start for the Titans after missing 3 games. How are we feeling about this?
Not great.
Yeah.
The big problem, and we got the accuracy problem with Will Levis. He does make more big plays than Mason Rudolph, but the big problem is his sack rate behind the exact same offensive line is twice as high as Mason Rudolph's this season. So they're just not going to get as many passes off. Plus, Will Levis takes off and runs more often than Mason Rudolph does. So again, kind of those situations where we felt really good about starting Calvin Ridley at the beginning of the week. Now he's dropped down into that low-end number 2, high-end number 3 territory. The other story here, of course, is that Tyjae Spears is expected to be back. So Tony Pollard loses a little bit in terms of target accuracy with Levis. Maybe loses a little bit in terms of his share of the running game. So I downgrade Tony Pollard, downgrade Calvin Ridley, but don't feel terrible if you have to start one of those guys.
Well, hey, maybe Will Levis will be Mayotivated this weekend. Is that what we can say? Can we say that? Heath isn't going to even give me a laugh on that. Thanks very much, Heath. Great stuff as always from Fantasy Football Today. Our fantasy expert Heath Cummings joining us to discuss some of the injuries and not even react to my poor puns. For more from Heath and the entire gang of Fantasy Football Today, make sure you check out the Fantasy Football Today podcast. Get it wherever you get your podcast audio. You can download and follow, or scan that QR code. You can get that latest episode right now.